So good morning, everyone. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Dr. Michael Amlung. I'm one of the associate directors of the Cofrin Logan Center. We're very excited that you're here this morning, and we're excited to see some new faces as well. It's nice to see such a big audience. For those of you that are not aware, we host 3 of these talks a semester from people outside of KU that are considered leaders in the field of addiction. And we kind of run the spectrum from basic researchers, neuroscientists, all the way through to clinical psychologists and people who are doing interventions. And so just to give you a little bit of a preview of some upcoming events before I introduce the speaker, we have Dr. Elizabeth Aston, who's from Brown University, is going to be coming in a few weeks to lead a workshop on qualitative methods. If you're interested in that, you can just reach out to me or look on our website. It'll be on there. And then our 2 remaining seminar speakers, Dr. Tori Spindle from Johns Hopkins, who does research on cannabis and all kinds of emerging things about cannabis vaping, cannabinoids, CBD. He'll be here. And then in April, Dr. Sarah Peterson from Pitt will be here, University of Pittsburgh. And she does work with people with minoritized identities, clinical psych interventions, and substance use. And those of you that are trainees here today from the Cofrin Logan Center, we're thinking about organizing like a trainee research showcase idea exchange for sometime in early May after finals are over. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll let you know some details, but it'll probably be, short 10 to 12 minute data blitz type talks, and we'll just everybody come together and learn about what everybody's doing. So with that, I'm really pleased to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Suzanne Mitchell from the Oregon Health and Sciences University. She is a tenured professor and vice chair in the Department of Behavioral Neuroscience. She also has appointments in psychiatry and the Oregon Institute for Occupational Health Science. She received her PhD from the State University of New York, Stony Brook. Her research interests include reward valuation and choice behavior, temporal and probability discounting, effort decision-making, and how all of these things interact with substance use in other clinical populations. And she's had a very extensive career of funding from different NIH institutes. She's the president of the Society for the Quantitative Analysis of Behavior and editor of one of the flagship journals in behavior analysis, the Journal of Experimental Analysis of Behavior. We've had a great visit so far with Dr. Mitchell. She's met with a lot of our faculty and our trainees. It's just been really wonderful to have her here. Today, she's going to be talking about exploring the role of reinforcer pathology in substance use disorders. I do want to mention for those of you who are trainees, if you didn't RSVP, we are having a trainee lunch immediately after this. We might have a couple extra box lunches, but even if you didn't RSVP, you're welcome to stay. There just may not be a lunch for you, but it'll be happening in this room shortly after the talk. So you're welcome to stay around if you want to have some one-on-one time, but some time with Dr. Mitchell. And I also just want to extend a thank you to Meg Rogero in the back, who's been doing all of the logistical work for this visit and scheduling all the rooms and all the travel and everything. So thank you, Meg, for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Suzanne.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I can't tell you how psyched I am to be here and things, and I'm comfortable answering questions during the presentation. I made a lot of slides, but I am not invested in getting to the end. So if people have things, they should feel free to ask. And in addition, you can probably hear that I'm a foreigner. So I might pronounce things in an odd way and you think, what is she talking about? Because of the accent thing. So it's probably something that's not clear rather than you not understanding. So please ask me to clarify and things. So it's not you, it's me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about reinforcer pathology. And given this audience, I expect that a lot of you will have encountered this concept before. And here's a nice little quote from a fairly recent paper. And what I want to highlight for you is these 2 behavioral elements here. The idea that that reinforcer pathology is characterized by a relatively high reinforcing value or drug demand is fairly high, reflecting this higher reinforcing efficacy of the substance. And this general decision-making bias where you overvalue smaller immediate rewards over larger later rewards, high delayed discounting. And I'm assuming that that's a concept that people are generally familiar with. If not, just give me a little sign. Oops, great. So I am going to really be focusing a little bit more on the delayed discounting or the discounting aspect than the demand portion. But I wanted to acknowledge right at the start that there are many papers that indicate that high demand is associated with diagnoses of substance use disorders. And there's just a couple here. Some of you may recognize some of these names. Just saying. And if you didn't recognize those names, I'm willing to bet you money that you may recognize some of these names, review papers demonstrating that substance use disorders in meta-analyses and such are higher in delayed discounting is higher in those populations. Yes, so really believe you recognize some of these names. But, you know, with delayed discounting, it's not just about substance use disorders. There's also data that suggests that higher levels of discounting, review data, are associated with other disorders, such as obesity and other psychiatric disorders. So just laying the landscape here, that when we think about reinforcer pathology, we're thinking about higher levels of demand, and we're thinking about higher degrees of delayed discounting. One of the things that, as an aside, so I have several asides here, things that you'd think that I would know the answer to, but I don't. And you all, the next generation, I am looking to you for research that's going to answer these sorts of questions. When I first came across this idea of reinforcer psychopathology, it seemed to me that really we were talking about deviations from reward maximization a lot of the time. So we think of delayed discounting as being a non-maximizing strategy because you're not taking the larger reward. We think about this heightened demand for drug as being a non-maximizing strategy because maybe you should be spending your energy and time resources getting other things as well. And I've been really sort of intrigued with this idea about whether we should be thinking about these reinforcer pathology in terms of, is this a maximizing efficient behavior? Are we talking about deviations from optimality? And I haven't made my mind up, because sometimes it's difficult to know what the optimal behaviors are. But I just want to throw that out there because I think that it's important to know that not even old people like myself who've been in the area for a long time have all the answers. There are questions out there for you all. So I'm going to start talking about delayed discounting. This is a little cartoon that, that a colleague gave to me many years ago. Why dogs rarely survive shipwrecks. And you can see all the little dogs. They're being asked, those in favor of eating all the food now, raise your hand, and they've all got their paws raised. And the idea is that may not be the most optimal strategy. So this next section of the talk, I'm focusing on delayed discounting as the reinforcer pathology idea. And I want to ask you, or I want to pose a question about why delay? And, you know, there's a lot of other forms of discounting out there. There's probability discounting, where you're choosing between a small but certain reward versus a larger reward that's associated with some probability you might not actually get it. There's also effort discounting, the idea that you can have a small reward with virtually no effort, or a large reward that requires a lot of work. And when I talk to medical students, I talk about it's like getting your degree in medical school. There's a lot of work and expense, and it goes on for a long time, but hopefully there's a high reward, as opposed to going into some other profession with a very smaller training period. And I don't want to mention any because I don't want to offend anybody. But this next section is really dealing with some studies looking at what's the relationships between different types of discounting. So why are we focused on delay? And some of this work was done by Darby Dyer. It was in my lab. And the first study that I'm going to talk about initially is this study looking at cigarette smokers, and they were contemplating quitting within the next 6 months. And these are their characteristics. You can see they didn't actually smoke very much. The days of heavy smoking, 30 cigarettes a day, and things seem to be gone, at least in Portland. So they're not really smoking that much. The sample size is fairly small, but because it's difficult to get people who just smoke cigarettes these days. So these participants, we had them do a delayed discounting task. And in this task, they were choosing between $25 at some delay. So it could be 90 days or 180 days versus some reward amount now. And in all of our studies, we like to, sometimes we use adjusting procedures, but more usually we use procedures where we just present each of the possible options in a random order. So you might be choosing between, for example, $8 now and $25 in a year. And then the next question might be $24 now and $25 in 30 days. So it's sort of a random order, and you'll see why in a bit. We also had our probability discounting task, and this in this experiment, we had sessions that were 7 days apart. And I think you can see here that while there is a positive correlation in that, and I guess I should explain that we're using the area under the discounting curve. So here you can see that for both the sessions, if you were somebody who discounted the delayed reward a lot, you also discounted the probabilistic reward a lot. And just a quick check-in. Are people familiar with the area under the curve measure? So you've got your discounting curve and you're just measuring that. Great. So session 2, there was a significant relationship, but not session 1. Okay, so that's all great, but no relationship. So obviously, delay discounting and probability discounting seem to involve some different processes, but we also wanted to look at a cognitive effort as well. And I'm presenting cognitive effort to you because I'm kind of excited about cognitive effort, even though it has the word cognitive in it. So we developed 2 tasks in the lab, one that we felt was about sustained attention and one that was about memory. And in each of these tasks, we have people do the effortful task. So they get a sense of what it's like. And then we put that in our discounting paradigm. So in the attention task, you'll see some arrows and the participants see the screen and they have to press the arrows on the keyboard that corresponds to the arrows that they're seeing. So just like this, pretty straightforward. And people do great at this. And I think that's really important because we don't want their behavior to be influenced by the, if you like, the fear of failure. We want them to decide, am I going to do this effort or not? Because I could do it, but you know what? I don't want to. And I'm sure you've all experienced that in your lives where you could do something, but you really choose not to. And I think that's a very different behavioral task than I could do it, but maybe I couldn't. So we have this attention task. We also have a memory task. This is working memory because people are updating and they see letters on the screen. For those of you who've done any cognitive classes, we're talking an NBAC situation. So they see the letters, they have to press whether the letter they're seeing right now is the same as the letter they just saw. So yes, no type of thing. And here's my little example. So you could see there was 2 A's that were together and then a lot of, so they're pressing, yes, it was, no, it wasn't, and that's it. So then in our task, they've practiced this because I think it's important for people when they're making these decisions about what are they going to choose to actually have experienced it rather than we use a potentially real reward set of tasks. So we pick one answer, one question, and whatever they chose for that, we give it to them. So this is the sort of parameter, and there's a little bit more detail here because you may not have encountered these tasks before. And we have them choosing between these effort conditions where it's how long you do the effort. And I realize that that has a temporal component to it, but I think it's also got an effortful component. And there are various analyses that you can do that suggest that the discounting isn't, if you just had minutes, you wouldn't see very much discounting because they're in your lab waiting. But you can see some discounting with the effort condition. So this is just a little bit to give you an idea. This is session 1 and session 2. You can see that in these 32 cigarette smokers, there's quite a robust response. You're seeing that discounting the value of the $25 at 20, when you have to do 20 minutes of effort for it. really sort of declines. The indifference points are there on the y-axis, and things are pretty similar between time 1 and time 2, which gives me a little bit of confidence. You can also see here that there were no sex differences here. I know it looks like on the attention task, I forgot to put a line, but the line's actually there, but it's underneath. And yeah. And these are median indifference points. So, okay, so no sex differences. Looks like things are fairly robust, but let's look at the relationships, the correlations, and there's some correlation, but with 32, for something to be statistically reliable, you need an R squared of 0.36. So these are not really making it with delay. Here's this attentional task with the arrows. Here's the probability. I mean, look at that. I mean, terrible, yeah, shotgun blast. With the memory, it's a similar sort of picture here. Again, nothing with probability. So what we've seen here in these data with these smokers is that there was a small hint of a relationship between delay and probability in one test. And I mean, you know, I did a whole pile of tests, so you got to kind of weigh that up. But there is a power issue here. It's only 32 people. So if one wanted to do power analyses, if you had 64 people or some large number, you'd see a relationship. But for us as behavior analysts, thinking about the individuals, it appears that there's very little relationship between our delay discounting and our effort discounting and our probability discounting. So when we're thinking about reinforcer pathology that's all rooted in delay discounting, we're still having to sort of think about, well, how come reinforcer pathology is not associated with steeper effort discounting or probability discounting? But the processes obviously aren't quite the same because the correlations are fairly low. There's obviously not a one-to-one substitute. And I think that this is one of those things that I myself, I'm showing you work that by and large is new or unpublished because it's things that I'm kind of struggling with. What are the relationships between costs that are really critical to demand functions? Okay, so here's a second study. This one's published. It's pretty small. Now we're talking about physical effort. That was all cognitive I just showed you. Here's physical effort, walking numbers of steps, and again, in a time period. I went hiking last summer, and some of the hikes, there were steps. And I thought to myself, there's a bunch of studies out there where it talks about walking up numbers of flights of steps. Would you walk up 100 flights of steps for $100? And depending on your socioeconomic status, you might do that or not. But as I was walking up these steps, I was thinking, you'd have to pay me so much more than $100. So this was, again, a task where people really had to do it. And these are areas under the curve. Across 3 different time points, people did 3 different sessions, separated by about 2 weeks. And you can see a good relative stability there. And you can see that there were some higher correlations for delay and probability. but not as much for the effort. So this is a little bit like we saw with the cognitive effort, that there seemed to be no relationship with delay and probability. But the probability and delay may be a little bit of something there.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Does it help or hurt to think of delay as cognitively effortful?
You know, I would say yes. I mean,
Right.
think,
Does it help or hurt
oh, in terms of the analysis,
conceptually?
I think conceptually there is something in that, because if you think about waiting,
Yeah.
it's,
Cognitively effortful.
yeah, and we've noticed, and this is sort of going off topic, but we've observed with our rats and those short delays, if they find something to do while they're waiting, we have these 24-second delays. If they find something to do, even if it's just eating their own feces, they actually discount less than if there's nothing. So I would say waiting itself it's hard. So yes, I think that's an excellent point. Thinking about how these cost measures fit together, there's overlap.
And is there value to thinking in system 1 and system 2? Because that's what we're talking about.
Yes. I mean, this is all fast processing, fast choices. I guess I have some reluctance to going fully down the system 1, system 2 road. Some of my cognitive colleagues would not agree with me on that. To me, it seems like the data suggest that there's some distinct features of effort. I mean, neurobiologically, there's sure, but even conceptually, I'm thinking of a Venn diagram where there's some overlap, where they're cost, and then there's things that are unique potentially to the situation. So if you've got nothing to do, when maybe waiting is not so bad, as if you have some work to do, and so waiting for the bus is very, very odious to you because you have other things you need to be doing. So yeah, I would say there's some overlap, but not complete overlap. And I think these data support that idea. Thank you. So a little bit of rat stuff. So we had 27 rats, and we had them doing delay and probability and effort, discounting physical effort, not walking this time, but lever pressing. So the delays are fairly short and they get some rewards and the probabilities there. And they have to press these levers. And those of you familiar with some of John Pinkston's work, the levers are rigid, but you can measure the effort exerted and have effort requirements. You think in human terms, you might be squeezing a hand grip or pressing something. So if you do that with rats, and we did that, and we could get discount functions. The 27 rats did all the conditions. It took a long time. You could fit discount functions. And again, the probability delay relationship in this case was statistically significant, but not the delay effort. So I've shown you 3 studies with different kinds of effort, but all of them are showing not a great relationship. So when we're thinking reinforcer pathology and we're thinking about delay, it seems unwise to just think, well, maybe other types of discounting can be plopped in that reinforcer pathology. And I'm sorry to say, I don't feel like there's sufficient data out there to really, not the same degree as with delay discounting, looking at substance users. I feel like that's a knowledge gap and a missed opportunity, because then maybe we can look at what part of the Venn diagram overlaps. Why is it delay? Why is the delay the predictive thing? Because it can't be about choosing between small and large. Yeah.
Do you think it could be that we're just more used to dealing with choices that are immediate versus delayed? You know, because this idea like we have to wait for that. We have so much experience with waiting for things, but a certain reward versus a 1 in 5 chance of winning something else. I mean, obviously, if you're playing the lottery or doing any sort of gambling, those sorts of choices, we don't, even though we might make them, we don't think about them as much. And then, you know, effort seems kind of novel too, you know, and so is it just that we have more of a history of working in the delay?
I think that's an excellent point. It could be familiarity, and I think that's an empirical question and a potential intervention issue. If some individuals, given that there's some relationship, maybe some individuals are really effort focused, but because there's some overlap with delay, we see it in their delay behavior, in which case I would predict interventions like episodic future thinking might work less well for those individuals who are more effort focused than the ones who are delay focused. So I think there's lots of experimental routes. It could totally be experience. And I think we're very used to thinking about, we're all used to thinking about, I think about everything as a delay discounting problem. I wonder whether people outside our circle, like the medical students, really think about how effortful things are. Yeah.
Well, and kind of related to that, I feel like we try to separate all these aspects of discounting, you know, but there's this overlap. Like we were talking yesterday about how with delay, there is a probability aspect because in our learning history, delayed things aren't always guaranteed.
Yeah.
And with effort, when I think of effort, this is anecdotal, but I would imagine a lot of people would think if something's more effortful, like I have to drive farther or do something more, that adds a delay aspect to it as well. And so I wonder if maybe that's why sometimes you see the relationships, sometimes you don't. It's really interesting that when you see the relationships.
And I wonder, and again, this is a little bit off topic, but so I wonder whether if your recent experiences have really had you experiencing some effortful choices, to what degree that's going to influence some of these correlations and influence your receptiveness, as it were, to particular treatment interventions. So could you train people to think more about effort and create effort intervention? Brandon.
Yeah, thinking about like neurological correlates of all this, I know Nancy Neef did some research with like delay fading in kids with ADHD and found that like kind of wishy-washy evidence for stimulants. So I'm curious if there's any evidence with delay discounting that stimulants have any effect on that.
So there was some people have seen with doses of amphetamine increased discounting, but some have seen decreased discounting. And there was an early paper by Cardinal et al. That talked about how the delay was filled and whether if there was a stimulus that you could use to track the delay, sort of a timing process, then you were more, the stimulants would be more efficacious if there was a filled delay than if you were just waiting and there was, what time is it? When's this thing coming? Yeah.
Before I ask my next 2 questions, I just want to make sure you're okay with us going this far off. Because I have questions that are so relevant to this conversation, but it probably takes us. Your choice, because you're the presenter.
Maybe save them a little bit, but remember them. I mean, I love having this discussion because I feel like that's part of what being a presenter is about, for us to all engage with the material. And I tried to pick things that we could engage with.
So just call on me when you want to extraneous questions.
Okay. I'm there. Okay, so I have another little delay discounting cartoon. Don't eat me now. Wait until I've matured into a beautiful plump swan. Okay. So I'm transitioning a little bit to other ways to compare, not just AUCs. Let's think about other ways to compare. And this is a little study. Darby was involved, and Vivian, who went to Pacific. Just saying. Okay, so this was just 57 adults, and we recruited them, and we had them do delay discounting and cognitive effort discounting, just like I've described before to you. These are their discounting curves right here. And then we, just to show you what they looked like, there wasn't that much discounting. This is a replication of there wasn't really that much in the way of correlation. You know, I went out to 4 decimal places just to sort of impress you here. So minimal correlation, we've seen that before. But what I wanted to show you, other metrics, is that you can look at how quickly they're making decisions. And so on the delay side, that's on the left panel, my left, then what you can see is when the delay, at the indifference point, people took quite a long time, but it was independent of how long the delay was. If they chose the immediate option, the decisions were made a little bit more quickly. So this is based on what they chose. Chose the delayed option, and we've replicated this since. As the delay gets longer, the reaction time gets longer. And maybe to anthropomorphize, it's like, I see these 2 options. It would be silly to choose the immediate option because it's like $1 and this is $25. But really, am I going to wait for a year? And I give people, because it's potentially real, we send them the money. So I think that function is due to, you really have to wait, but you don't want to. And so there's some hesitation in the response. You don't see that with cognitive effort because everything's right now, obviously. The same sort of idea at the indifference point takes you a bit longer to make the decision and respond. But whether you're choosing the effortful option or the no effort takes about the same amount of time to respond. And that increase over the effortful requirement is not actually statistically significant. So this is another example where when you are making those decisions, there's a difference there. And you also see that when we've been doing a bit of eye tracking. And so this is a little bit more complicated because there's 4 things, but you can see with the delay discounting, when the delay is not chosen, you look at that and then you go, and it's quick. When you're choosing the delay, you're choosing the immediate, or the time you're looking at the immediate, but you're not going to choose it. All of those are similar amounts of time. Very different from the cognitive effort task, where when you choose the effortful option, it takes a long time, but you're looking at that you're gazing at this thing. When the effort's not chosen, you look at it briefly, moving on. And then for the no effort options, you get very similar amounts of gazing, whether you choose it or not. And so it's a different, some people have equated this with information gathering, if we want to be not very behavioral sciencey about it. But I'm just trying to emphasize to you that in these two different discounting types, the way that you are looking at the options seems to be different, and the way that the reaction times appear to be different. So when we're thinking about our reinforcer pathology and our delay versus can we include other types of discounting, not only are things not correlated, but how you engage with the task appears to be different too. Okay. My signal for transition here. So hopefully I've convinced you we can measure effort discounting, cognitive or whatever, but it doesn't seem to be exactly the same. Or maybe there's a core of things that are the same, but they're not substitutes. Even though when we think about unit prices and demand, often we're thinking about effort. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about substance use phenotypes. And this is very much, it's a little bit work in progress. So this is something that was done by Rochelle Yankelevitz. And I should tell you, all of this is about if discounting is somehow related to substance use disorder, how does that happen? Is it some phenotype? The reward sensitivity, response to withdrawal, is that what's related? Like, if you hate waiting, do you hate the discomfort of withdrawal? If you like a small reward now, are you all about the drug reinforcer? And this is two experiments that try to get at that. So these are alcohol drinkers. We got them in the lab. We had 2 administration sessions, a placebo and an alcohol beverage. And this, they got like 3 shots over time during the session. This is our little timeline here. We did the delay discounting assessment at the beginning, and we looked at questionnaire measures. And I know that's sort of verboten, but there we are. So this is the alcohol, the breath alcohol curve. You can see we're giving them these beverages where the lines are. We're measuring blood alcohol. Yay, it goes up. Good job. People are obviously not hiding their drinks down their shoes or whatever. And there's a descending limb as well. So we started wondering, how can we measure the subjective effects over time? So maybe on the ascending portion, this is a curve that shows their liking. So they're rating, do you like how you feel on a scale of 1 to 100? And you can see with the alcohol, right at the beginning, they like it. But when they're up to, you'll have noticed, way legally intoxicated, they're not liking it quite so much. And compared to placebo, which is pretty flat. So what we did was we created another area under the curve and just did subtractions. And I'm not sure it's the best way. I made it up. Because what I wanted to try and do is look at correlations between discounting on the x-axis and their responses. So the alcohol feeling versus the placebo feeling. And I had thought, you know, those who discount a lot are going to be really into the alcohol. We're going to see a lot more, yay, alcohol compared to placebo. And that's not what we're finding here. So the shallow discounters, I mean, it's not significant at all, but we're actually seeing a little bit more alcohol response. Kind of glad it wasn't significant. I've had to rethink my way of life. We did another assessment here. And same thing with this other measure. So not belaboring it, but people report they like the stimulant effects of alcohol. So comparing it against placebo, and this was, you try to be double blind, but you know, people kind of recognize when you give them that amount of alcohol. So we're trying to look at what's the difference. And maybe that's not the best way to look at it. Maybe you need to not even worry about placebo, or you need to worry about peaks. But in terms of this metric, we didn't see anything. Okay, here's my last study that I'm going to tell you about. And this is going back to the first study I talked about. It's the same sample of our daily smokers and preparing to quit. And we were interested in a lapse task. So we got them in and we were going to look at how long could they abstain from smoking. These are people thinking about quitting within the next 6 months, and used basically a contingency management type of prep, but a short-term one. And I think I can illustrate it better here. So they come on in, we do some initial assessments, all sorts of discounting, and then we have a lapse period of 2 hours. And in that 2-hour period, every 5 minutes, you earn 15 cents. And so in 2 hours, you can earn quite a bit of money. And I should have worked that out before this talk. Can't do it on the fly, obviously. But unlike many of the lapse procedures out there, we also had a 1-hour ad-lib smoking, because I wanted to make sure that if you weren't lapsing, that you still smoked afterwards, that you weren't just not smoking at all. So we did the lapse thing and 2 sessions, and you can see this is a survival plot showing how many people lapsed. You can see some people really lapsed immediately, but you can also see a lot of people managed to go 2 hours without smoking. And all but 3 of them then smoked when cigarettes were free, once the contingency management was removed. Okay, so our question was it related at all? Oh, and I should have removed the A1 and A2. So we found with our discounting, our delay discounting, there was actually a relationship there, that the individuals who discounted more steeply were the ones in this procedure that lapsed more readily. It's a small number, it's a bit of a pilot, it's not published, we're kind of working on this. You can also see there was a big dose of nothing for probability and our cognitive effort measures, but delay worked. And so this is kind of where I am. We think about reinforcer pathology as being something that's associated with substance use disorder. In the discounting realm, it seems to be firmly rooted in delay. Even though there are other types of discounting, and we can ask to what degree are those processes related, either neurobiologically And there absolutely are a lot of neurobiological systems overlap. But functionally, to what degree are these things related? And then, are they, to what degree, how do they actually relate to substance use? And that's one of the things that really sort of troubles me. You know, is it something, is it something heritable? And yeah, there's some data for that. From a behavior analytic perspective, what about reward valence and relapse and discomfort? How are those working? Like, why would delayed discounting map onto some contingency management associated lapse? Those are the sort of questions I feel like we should be thinking about, because if we just blame it on, oh, it's reinforcer pathology, end of story, we're missing an opportunity to really understand what's causing things or what's not causing things, those other types of discounting. Why is that different? So that's really all the substance I have. I have another little delay discounting cartoon about bugs. I guess you have to know bugs don't live long. Had a lot of help doing all of this, and my funders, of course, Ratties, and that's all I have for you. I'm ready for.
Well, you've actually made my questions more relevant at the end. I'm gonna just introduce myself and tell you the thoughts real quick so I don't hog the time so you can spy any of them. My name is Bruce Lees. I'm the clinical director of Cofrin Logan Center for Addiction Research and Treatment. We do a lot of work in the community. First thing that just blew my mind is I'm a huge fan of reinforcer pathology as a construct, right? And delayed discounting. And it only occurred to me for the first time in a 40-year career that it's really relevant to the AA slogan. Number one slogan is one day at a time. So that really is fascinating. We can talk about that probably, but let's not. The question you asked at the end, I think is of great interest, and that's how does this all tie together? And for those who aren't familiar with System 1 and System 2, because I brought it up, the originators who go way back, talked about how we function in automatic. On automatic, autopilot.
Kahneman, is it?
Kahneman and Tversky and all that, and et cetera, et cetera. It's interesting here is I wonder if anyone, to your knowledge, has done studies of early child, instead of there's a tendency to discount delays. We know that it's related to things that happen forward, but have we looked backward? Because my guess is that trauma, the Kahneman, Tversky, all those people talked about how System 1 is a safety system. It originated with us trying to figure out what are we going to do about the lions and tigers and bears that are going to kill us. And when you're traumatized, you learn to focus primarily on what you need to do right now to be safe. And I wonder the extent to which people are so early in life focused on automatic responses that keep them safe, that the future doesn't matter eventually. And I wonder if trauma not terrible trauma, but even minor trauma on a continuum contributes to delay, discount. And then, so what about causes and effects? I wonder, if that sets you up. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is cognitive behavioral therapy does aim to teach people to delay, to stop discounting delay and to see it as value and to move forward. So there you have it. I'm done.
There's a lot to unpack.
I know,
in what you said. So I think, Dr. Yee created a past discounting task, and that suggested that how you discount the future, those who discount the future pretty steeply also discount the past. My graduate student is really interested in that question because his work with substance users has been really, they can report the first time they took whatever, and it is not a memory that's being discounted. Maybe everything else has been discounted, but that experience has not. So he's very interested in building on some of the AA principles of thinking about the things that happen to you. So he calls it episodic retrospective training. So you're thinking about the negative things in the past, not just, oh, how wonderful I will be if I can manage to not drink or take prank or whatever it is. So I think there's room for thinking about the past and its influence, as well as the sort of the therapeutics about what's my life going to be like. In terms of the trauma, I mean, early childhood trauma is
Childhood experience.
yeah, and there has been some suggestion that one of the things that does is, as it were, narrow your time horizon, which would be, as you pointed out, evolutionarily adaptive. Like if the lion's coming after you, who cares about, are you laying up food for winter? You need to be really out of there.
And that's what a traumatized kid feels like. The lions are coming all the time.
Right. And so I think that's an important therapeutic approach to try and deal with. Can we both think about expanding that time horizon so you are imagine what your life could be like. So in the people that my graduate student sees, he reports people are not thinking about what my life is going to be like in a year because they are caught up in I've got to get through this right now. So even when you try episodic future thinking, it's not very compelling to them. And so it seems like there's a whole training associated with perhaps removing that feeling that the lion is coming. And I'm not a clinician, so.
It will require system two, which is the more deliberate intention. The effortful thinking.
Right, and people don't always want to do the effortful thing. I mean, there are days when I feel like I don't want to make one more decision. Spouse, you decide what's for dinner. I've already made 15 decisions today that have been big time. So yeah.
So somebody needs to administer ACEs to 100 people and then do delayed discounting tests. ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences 10-item questionnaire.
I think that would be awesome. I strongly recommend that someone, and if not here, this is an ideal set of qualified people to do that.